Hello and welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. Art Wolfe, renowned landscape and wildlife photographer, shares his journey of nearly 5 decades of photography, blending art and conservation. Born in Seattle, Washington, Wolfe's background in fine arts profoundly shaped his approach to photography. His work spans all 7 continents, focusing on capturing the world's natural beauty and indigenous cultures. His photography is characterized by artistic composition and minimal digital manipulation, allowing him to document and advocate for environmental conservation. Beyond his photographic achievements, Wolfe has published over 100 books, including award-winning titles like The Living Wild, and has collaborated on numerous international exhibitions. He's also a passionate educator, leading photography workshops, online courses, and serving as a keynote speaker at events globally. His public television series, Art Wolfe's Travels to the Edge, offers insights into his creative process and has garnered prestigious awards. Despite his accomplishments, Wolfe remains dedicated to honing his craft, encouraging others to pursue their creative passions with determination. His career highlights include multiple awards and recognition for his role in advancing conservation photography and his tireless advocacy for preserving the natural world. Wolfe's work stands as a testament to his commitment to the intersection of art and environmental stewardship. Art shares insights into his dynamic career in landscape and wildlife photography, emphasising the importance of staying inspired by continuously experimenting with new subjects and styles. We discuss how his background in fine art has influenced his photography and how he critiques his work and others. He describes his approach to previsualisation, the impact of travel and diverse projects on his creativity, and his passion for conservation. We also touch on the significance of maintaining a positive attitude, managing disappointment, and the importance of effective communication. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Art. Welcome to Landscape Photography.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful to have you on the show, and something I've been looking forward to for some time. I'm definitely a fan of your work and definitely an avid watcher of what you're doing. And I know you've had a long and varied career, so I won't bore everyone with the career. They can find out for themselves. But I want to start off with, how do you stay inspired with your career and stay inspired to get out and take photos?
I learned from my art instructors. My background's painting and art, fine art, and they kept on goading me to keep trying new things. And I basically took that to heart. And so over the years, when I felt like I was getting in a bit of a rut, I would just change my destination or style and subject. So I constantly am shooting new subjects virtually every year. And that keeps everything fresh.
Yeah, cool. And you mentioned that, I guess, the visual arts. How much has that influenced your photography, and how much of that learning that you did early on build into how you've made yourself into a photographer?
Grant, that's a perfect question. It plays a huge role into not only what I shoot and how I shoot, but how I critique. I was critiqued from the time I was 16 or 17 in art school all the way through. So I learned how to critique other people in the tours and the workshops that I give. I very much love teaching. And so critiquing is all part of that. But I not only studied fine art painting, but also art history. And I started emulating some of the French Impressionist painters for style. And it eventually evolved into a new style for me. And more recently, I started really exploring abstract expressionism and looking at the various painters. And then as you start to look at their work and finding photos that look a little like their work, it eventually becomes your own work. And I'm not trying to say that I'm copying, but I'm inspired by it, and it takes you off on a unique journey. And so all of that is part and parcel to what I do and what inspires me.
I got to say, I think that copying and mimicking is a major part of learning arts, and it's learning almost anything. That when you start learning our language, you're just copying at the start,
I
and then
totally agree with that.
you develop your own voice eventually.
Yeah, you do, because we're never going to wind up identically copying a Renoir or a Gauguin
No.
or whatever. But when you start to look at the way they painted and you start looking for subjects similar, it really starts to become your own style or one of many styles. So I have lots of different styles. And in wildlife, every time I did a book on wildlife, specifically challenged myself to have a different point of view. So I did a book called Migrations, which was nothing more than patterns of herds of animals and flocks of birds and all of that. I did a book called Vanishing Act, which was camouflage, looked very different than Migrations.
Yeah.
Rhythms from the Wild was long and impressionistic, blurred motion. So every time I took a similar subject, I always tried to have a fresh and different perspective.
Yeah, fantastic. I guess one of the things that a lot of people, when they're starting out, is looking for how they develop their own style and how they, and as I said earlier, copying is a big part of that initially, but you've got to get out of that at some point and go, okay, I'm going to put my big boy pants on and be me, not Joe Bloggs or whoever it is that I've been copying for a while.
Right.
Where did that happen for you, I guess? When did you start saying, okay, this is my style, or this is the style that I'm going to start to adopt?
I have to say, Grant, that I don't even think I have a style. People say, "Oh, I can recognize one of your photos." It's really my range of subjects are uh, varied that I can't even recognize similarities between my work. Now,
Wow.
if it was just landscapes, it's true. There's the big, beautiful points of view of a breathtaking landscape, but then I shoot a lot of details and abstracts within that. So I don't even think I have a style.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
And if I don't recognize it, other people will say they see it, but yeah. And in
Well,
fact, when you look at famous artists, they stayed with a style so you would recognize a Pablo Picasso
or a
or
Renoir and so forth. Yeah.
exactly. And I'm too restless and curious, and I like to travel around the world. So I would never be one of those people that had a redundancy in, and that's good and bad because it's good because everything keeps fresh in my mind. But the bad thing is exactly what we've been alluding to. I don't think there's a style. So I don't know if people can look at my work and say, oh, that's an art. No, I don't see it.
Great. I guess with painting, you can put light wherever you want it. And as long as it makes sense to the viewer, you can utilize the tricks of light and shade in that form of art. Photography is the opposite. You get given the light and you have to then develop it yourself. How do you play with light in your photography and use that to your advantage so that you're pointing the viewer to what you want them to see?
If it's a very complex environment, and with, excuse me, with Vanishing Act, the camouflage in nature, I wanted flat light because I'm already in a very complex environment trying to hide the animal in plain sight. I didn't need dramatic side lighting or backlighting or front lighting or any of that kind of light to further confuse the eye because the complexity of a forest did the trick. If it is in the deserts or in the high Himalaya and mountain ranges around the world, of course, the lower the light, the more dramatic it picks up the landforms.
Yep.
And so I'm very much aware of light, and I will I'm not one that will camp out for 4 days, but I might, in fact, walk for 3 weeks of the Baltoro Glacier in the
Wow.
Karakoram Range of Pakistan to get dramatic light on K2
Yeah.
or on Mount Everest. Or so I'm willing to put the energy in for just one photo if I got it in my brain. But on
Yeah.
the other hand, I won't sit in a blind for 2 weeks trying to document the 12-month life cycle of squirrels. So I'm very impatient. I move on. If it's not happening now, certainly there's something happening over the ridge beyond. So I usually move rather than stay.
Wow. Okay. That's a little bit unusual for a wildlife photographer. And I know you do landscapes as well, and that's what I like to focus on. But given the breadth of your wildlife work, to me, wildlife takes far more patience than landscape, because landscape, you can sit there and you can tell if that light is going to come or not. And you can sometimes you just get this gift and it's there. But other times you sit there and say, all right, 5 more minutes and that shadow will be right where I want it. Bang, I've got it.
Yeah, it's funny because I like photographing indigenous cultures,
Hmm.
wildlife landscapes. And that goes back to your first question, how do you keep it fresh? I keep it fresh because I keep mixing it up. If I'm
Yeah.
working on wildlife, just came out last November, that was all international wildlife. Now I'm working on a book called Act of Faith, which is the big religions around the world, but also
Yeah.
voodoo, shamanism, all the crazy things people believe in. I
Yeah.
myself don't have a religion, so I can go into Islam or Judaism or Christianity without a preconceived prejudice. It's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
good to me.
Nice.
But I love landscapes, and I'm glad we're talking about that because I say to my students a lot that look for the abstract, look for different ways of seeing a big landscape, but don't tell me you want to put this on your, what is the expression? It's pocket list? Something. What was it?
The bucket list.
Bucket list.
Yeah.
Struggling with that word. Yeah, people say, oh, that's on my bucket list. And they're going to go and virtually put their tripod in the holes of somebody that's shot that. And you look on the internet and there's probably a million photos from that viewpoint alone. And
Yeah.
that's a hollow victory. And so
Yeah.
I go to them, I spur them on to look from different vantage points and look for your own unique point of view and your own copyright. And I bring that up because I look at photos and I can't even tell if they're mine or somebody else's anymore because they all look alike.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point. It's one thing that I tell my classes as well. You've got to work a location. You can't just, as you say, put your tripod into the same holes as somebody else. You've actually got to sit there and look at it with your own eyes and work out what you want to interpret that as. And yeah, okay, the bucket list shot and the iconic, there's some places where you've got to be there. Yeah, that's my interpretation of this, and the weather conditions were slightly different or whatever. You can do that. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with anyone doing that. But if you really want to express yourself, you've got to actually look a bit deeper and find something that's unique and a little bit different. And I
Yeah, I
guess,
think when I first started teaching right out of college, I would be spending a lot of time talking about how to read the light, how to get the right exposure, and how to do all the kind of things that are now done by the cameras themselves.
yeah, yeah,
So that frees you up to go deeper and deeper into your own imagination to find new ways of telling the story. And that's a good challenge, actually. No longer talk about how to get a correct exposure. The cameras are doing it so well these days.
yeah,
Because I started taking pictures 5 decades ago. So
yeah,
many of the locations I went to were fresh and new because I traveled early and often. Now it's a challenge because in America alone, there's 10,000 really competent photographers. And so the level of quality across the board has risen. And for you, Grant, and for me to stay relevant, we've got to we can't sit back and rest on our laurels. We got to share what we've learned, but also push ourselves and come up with new photos that are fresh.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I guess one of the things that has come out from what you've said already very strongly is the importance of having goals and projects in your work. How do you go about, and how many projects do you have on the go at the same time? How do you go about picking, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm gonna dedicate a book or a series of a portfolio to X.
I feel sorry for a lot of my students, and I'll answer the question, but I want to preface it by saying that they put a lot of time and energy and money into their passion of photography, but when they get home, often they're the only ones that see it.
Yeah.
And I think that would be really terrible not to be able to share, because I think we're all communicators with our work. We're not just shooting for ourselves, but we're shooting to inspire other people and to uplift or educate other people.
Absolutely.
So I'm generally working on 5 projects at once, and I can divide my mind fairly succinctly between a book on religion, but while I'm over in Spain or Israel or wherever it may be, there's other things that will attract my attention, and I can compartmentalize them into that and that. There's a lot of things I don't do well, but that one I do pretty well by working on 5 different projects at once. It's almost like a juggler keeping the balls in the air. And I love that kind of energy. And you never come home empty-handed, because if you're only working on one specific idea and there's 4 other subjects, yeah, you're going to get those as well.
Yeah. Do you ever look back on your career and ask yourself if you would have done something differently?
I never look back. Seriously.
Wow.
I never look back. I only look forward. And so what happened last week or 2 weeks ago is rapidly fading out of my mind. And I'm always thinking about tomorrow. I'm definitely a left-handed Virgo, and I make lists of what I need to do tomorrow, the next day, and I never even think about. So there's no regrets. Regrets for me is useless energy, and I'm not even certain that you were looking for regrets, but I just don't have them.
Yeah. No, it wasn't specifically regrets. So it was more, is there anything where you said, all right, I wish I'd done that differently?
I think we all have that. And if you don't have that, you're probably not a human. So yeah, you can look and say, okay, that was not the best decision, but I'm not like sitting there bemoaning it. It's water over the dam. Think about tomorrow.
Fair enough. I think that's a fantastic attitude too. It's very refreshing. I talk to a lot of photographers, and a lot of them, I don't always ask that question, but if they've had a long and varied career, it's definitely one that I put in there. But it's interesting hearing a lot of people say, oh yeah, if I'd done this slightly differently, maybe my life had taken a different turn, but I'm quite happy with where I am now anyway. And that's the main thing, is that as long as you're happy where you are.
It's funny because, Grant, I was the 3rd child of 3, and my older brother and my older sister were constantly in trouble with the parents and given curfews and given rules. And I was never given a single rule or curfew, because I always already had projects when I was 7. I was collecting bird eggs and making a collection of that, or drawing or painting. And I know the 3rd child or the last child usually skates.
Yep.
And I definitely did, but I also didn't abuse it because I had my own agenda, even at early age. So it's never changed. I had a little bird book and mammal book and tree book. So I memorized all the trees, birds, mammals in the forest nearby. And so I'm just older now, but I love exactly the same thing.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation that you do a bit of pre-visualization. Is that a tool that you've had in your kit bag for a bit, that you have an idea or a concept of what you want to get before you get to a location?
Absolutely true. And the trick then is to not have it so locked into your mind that you're oblivious or blind to opportunities that unexpectedly arise. So it's a bit of both. Having an agenda, having a thought of what you do, a little bit of research of where you're going and what you would like to see. It's probably less true with landscapes as it is culture, because landscapes, like when I'm down in South Island of New Zealand, yeah, we're going by Mount Cook, and I went down there in 1980 to try to climb Mount Cook. I know the South Island pretty well.
Yeah.
And now I've got better cameras. I'm teaching, doing 2 different tours. So I don't have the pressure to come up with any photos. I'm already making my money off teaching the workshop.
Yeah.
But there will be times in the next 30 days that I'm down there that unexpected things will arise.
Yep.
And I will try to seize that moment. And those are the exciting moments. Not getting a spectacular sunrise on Mount Cook from all the locations. People have done that forever. I will shoot it. Don't get me wrong. I'll shoot that, but it won't be the thing that I will dream about at night. It will be those. One of your shots that I love is a waterfall with foam that's swirling around. I love those kind of shots. Those are far more valuable to me as a fan of your work than a beautiful sunset over a beach. Those are the ones that are really memorable for me.
Yeah, I've got to say the same. And that particular shot, that was fairly opportunistic. I've been to that location several times. It's probably about an hour and 10 from where I live. And you get down there, and most of the time that stream just flows through and there's no bubbles or anything on it. I happened to go there. It was a fairly rainy, dull day, and the waterfall was flowing quite well, and those bubbles had formed, and they were just making these lovely patterns in the water. And it was like, oh, yeah, I've got it. I just have to see it.
I love that image. It's brilliant.
No,
I looked through your work before I came on, and you are very talented. Very happy to be talking with you.
Thank you so much. That means a hell of a lot to me.
Oh, and it's true.
In going into the field with a concept, I guess when you don't get what you were looking for, because it might be conditions, or you might find there's been a landslide and therefore you can't actually transition to where you want to be. How do you deal with that disappointment? Is it then
I never come home empty-handed because of what I said earlier. I've got some different projects, and so even if there's a mudslide and closes the road, I'll turn around and there'll be something I can grab. So I definitely control my psychology. I am very careful of my own psychology, because I know the line between sanity and insanity is often crossed, especially in bad traffic.
Yep.
But I remain upbeat all the time, seriously, because you have to have that kind of energy if you do this for 5 decades. And I'm gone. I'm gone most of the time. I just came in from Namibia. I'm home now for 7 days, and now I'm leaving on Friday to New Zealand. So you got to maintain a high level of positive energy. And after 5 decades, you can't allow yourself to be disappointed in anything. You just got to find the good photos wherever you can.
Yeah. I think a lot of people.
I'm not trying to paint a false opinion. If there's negative people around me that I know, I just slowly separate from them. I don't want energy taking me down. So these people, we all have those kind of people that you say, hey, how are you doing? And then they give you a 10-minute list of all the things that are wrong. I won't ask that question again to those people, nor often they'll just drift away and I don't see them anymore.
Yeah, I'm very much of the same opinion. It is all about being positive and staying that way as much as possible. I guess one of the things that a lot of people do struggle with is that disappointment, and some of that comes from setting expectations. I think what you said earlier about going out without many expectations and with that positive attitude that you're not going to be disappointed regardless, because you can actually get something regardless of conditions, regardless of where you are, except maybe horizontal rain. That's always challenging.
Yeah, horizontal rain, though, with wildlife can be amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I love the atmospheric conditions of mist and snow and rain and fog and all those kind of things that now we have cameras that can stop a snowflake. Although
Yep.
in Australia, you'd be hard pressed unless you're up in the snowy mountains
Yeah,
to
you've
find
got to do
snowflakes.
a bit of work to get snow here.
That's right. But I was in the Sahara and there was a windstorm blowing up sand. It was miserable. You were getting it in your eyes and all that, but fantastic photos of camels in those kind of photos when people look and they say, oh my God, it looks terrible out there. But those are the memorable photos that almost look like a painting.
Yeah. I want to turn a little bit towards your work in conservation, and you put a lot of emphasis on the environment, on wildlife, on the landscapes. How important is that conservation message to you, and how do you go about getting it across? And I'm really interested mostly in how successful do you think you've been with that conservation message?
We donate a lot of photos that are not signature shots of mine, that are fur seals wrapped in plastic netting, miserable photos to look at. But I take the pictures because I know Greenpeace or an organization similar could utilize those to champion a cause. We, over the years, would connect with big environmental groups. The NRDC is the Natural Resource Defense Council. WCS is the Wildlife Conservation Society. We did work with all the big environmental groups centric towards the United States, because we tap into their client base, their followers. They can write the foreword to a book and use the book as gifts to their donors. So it's a great marriage between a producer of the images and publishing a book that's got already a group of people that are invested in that book already. So it's a good marriage for them, and it's a good marriage for us, because our photos, my photos, become the worm on the hook that attracts people in, and then they can tell their story of what they're up to and what they're trying to say. We've done that with African Parks in Africa, which is an organization that is so good that they've come into many countries and rescued national parks that were just being trashed, or poachers were coming in, killing elephants and rhinos. So African Parks just comes in, and they've got the wherewithal and the knowledge to preserve the environment. So they're just one organization that I think has been a happy marriage with us.
Yeah, fantastic. What does success in general look like for you in your photography?
I just was awarded Lifetime Achievement Award by a university that's got 90,000 students. It's a huge university. And it's a great honor, and yet it's like a nanosecond in my brain. I don't have, though many of the books I've worked on have garnered awards, I never enter a photo contest in my life. I never seek awards. I graciously accept it when it's bestowed on me, but I'm not trying to win an award to put it on my website to champion myself. It's not that I'm so modest. It's just, it's not what turns me on. What turns me on is doing a beautiful book that really reaches emotionally to my audience. That's what really gets me excited.
Yeah, fantastic. One of the things that a lot of people in their careers in photography struggle with is how do they move from being amateur to being professional? And I know you did that a long time ago. I guess one of the things that I'm really interested in this podcast is helping people make a decision about, is this the right career choice for me, etc. What advice would you give to somebody that is considering that move?
I'm laughing because I'm laughing at that because that's one of the first things I ask. If I'm giving a public talk, for instance, and I gave one before 600 people on Friday night, last Friday, people want to know how they can justify buying a camera by selling images. In other words, they want to justify their passion. And I say, why would you do that?
Yeah.
You have had a successful career as a dentist or a lawyer, or now you're retired. And mostly I have a lot of retirees. My tours are probably on the top end financially of people in the States. And so it's professional types that really take a lot of my classes. And it's like, why would you try to justify making money from your work rather than just keeping it fun and a passion? Because the passion is what's going to keep you alive longer. The minute you introduce the need to make or justify buying a camera, you're going to add an element of stress that will start to diminish the fun and the passion in it. And by the way, it's really tough to make a living in photography these days. And so why do that? You don't need the money. Why do that? And that's usually what I say to them.
Yeah, fair enough.
Now, I do teach some workshops where the economy is as low as we could possibly go, because there are a lot of young people that could not afford me. And so we make that available. Just west of where I live is a peninsula with beautiful mountains and rainforests and waterfalls and all those things. And so I'll have 5 assistants and we can bring in like 25 people and make it much more affordable. And people love that. And every year we fill that. And those are the younger people that are in college or even, yeah, they're probably from, on average, between 20 and 40.
Yeah.
Whereas most of my clients are 50 to 70.
Yeah, fair enough. What's one thing that you've learnt from your business that you'd like to pass on to somebody that was starting their own photography business?
You have to realize that it is not just a job. It's not like and you know this very well, it's not 9 to 5, 5 days a week.
No.
You
It's
have
a
to live it.
lifestyle.
It's a life. It's a life choice. I don't take vacations, nor have I. And people would say, yeah, but your life's a vacation. Yeah, you told that to me when a flight is canceled and you're at an airport all night long sleeping on a rug or any of those things. That there's a myriad of things that are not what most people think a globe-trotting photographer has to put up with. You have to be patient. Getting on a plane from Seattle to San Francisco, then I think it's 12 hours down to Auckland and another hour down to Christchurch. That's not easy. Especially I turned 73 last Friday. It's not easy for people. But they just see the pictures and they think, oh, your life is a vacation.
Well, you just turn up and push a button, don't you?
Yeah, that's all you do. But I don't really lament or dwell too much on those kind of things because I'd rather have people be envious of me thinking I have the best job in the world, which I do.
Yeah,
but yeah, you have to live it. I think about it all 7 days a week.
And I think that.
Let me address one other thing that you brought up a couple of minutes ago. I did a body of work called the Human Canvas. And I took over 100 individuals, stripped them naked, spray painted them black and white. Those my assistants did. And then I hand painted them into very elaborate backdrops. And that I completely storyboarded. I did smaller drawings about that big, and I had a board for each shoot that usually they were about 2 months apart. And when you've got on average 30 individuals totally naked standing around, there's no, oh, I wonder what we're going to do next. No, you have to have it all planned out, storyboarded, one right after another from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Yeah. And the models were, a lot of them were trainers, personal trainers. They were in good shape, but it's a lot of work. And so that really rang true in my mind when you asked, do you go on a trip preconceived? Yeah, I do. But in that particular body of work, it was to the nth degree.
Yeah. That's project management, literally from woe to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had 13 assistants. I had 30 humans. That was the most at one time, but over a 10-year period, there were over 100 individuals, all races, all genders, everybody, it was just a cross-section of humanity, and everybody enjoyed it. And I didn't have any money to pay them, but I gave them model prints, which they were very happy.
Nice. Yeah. Very cool.
That was cool.
You talked a little bit about your workshops, and I get that they're at the high end, but what can somebody expect when they're on an Art Wolfe workshop? What does a workshop look like?
It's usually inappropriate dialogue.
It comes with
we don't put on the airs when I'll say anything, and people, they either love it or they hate it, but they don't hate it because they keep coming back for more. As I said in the audience the other night, when you're up to your ass in bird shit most of your life, you can't be too arrogant or full of yourself. You got to be really accessible and casual, but still have the mission of teaching them something that is unique for them. And I take teaching extremely seriously. And so I actually got a teaching certificate along with my 5-year degree in fine art painting. So the ability to communicate is really an important part of this business.
Yeah. I think it's got to be a massive part of any photographer's road to success, is that ability to actually communicate visually, but also with clients, with suppliers and so forth, around how they actually build up their body of work so that it is saleable.
Yeah, a lot of as I said, most of my students are just doing it because they love it.
Passion.
And I say congratulate, because in America, the average man today, if he retires today, he will be dead in 18 months. That's what the average person. But if you have a passion for cooking, for dance, for writing, for any of the humanities, you have a reason to get out of bed.
That's right.
So let me just elaborate just a little more. If it's a workshop in America, it's probably a weekend. It's probably a 4-day workshop, starting on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then on Sunday, critique. If it's a tour to Africa or New Zealand, we're gone all day long, but I'll try to critique at the end of it. I have learned well to critique, and often I use in real time. So we'll import their images into the computer, and I'll just work on it as if it was mine. And I'm fairly fast at that. And that's probably the best part. The best learning occurs during the critique.
Oh, yeah. I think it's one thing that I always encourage people to do, is seek out somebody that they trust to be able to give both clear and also very frank critique to their work,
Yeah.
because if it's a terrible image, the horizons aren't straight, the bad lighting or whatever, they haven't nailed the composition or whatever, then you've got to say that. You can't be saying, "Oh, well, it looks great." Off you go.
Yeah, but this is the beauty of doing it in Lightroom, because I can straight horizons. I can
Yeah, exactly. You can
real
sort
time
out
as
those
I'm describing what I'm doing. I'm transforming their image. I've learned that if you start off with a negative, that's all people are going to hear. They're not going to even, it's almost
exactly.
like they're covering
Yeah.
up. I will find something really positive and then ease into a critique, but never am I demoralizing somebody, because it's just not the way I am, nor the way they learn.
Yeah, I think you've got to couch the negative with the positives, and
Yeah.
if there's no encouragement, then they won't be encouraged to continue.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the travel. You've traveled, I think, literally everywhere. Is there a country
Almost.
you haven't been?
Yeah. I actually just flew from Johannesburg to Dubai. Then from Dubai, it's a 14-hour flight to Seattle. But flying over the empty corridor of the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula, I looked down on Oman, and I would love to go to Oman. I'm going to be going to Uzbekistan this year or
Wow.
next year. So I'm kind of, and I've never been to Egypt. I've kept places that a lot of people will go for their vacation towards the last quarter of my life, which I'm
Yeah.
in now. And so I'll go to Egypt next year with a tour. And so I'm knocking them off. I don't want to go back to China. I've been to China enough times, and I have been to Russia a couple times, but I'm too pissed off at Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin to go to these countries. Yeah. I really want to come back to Australia. I've been all over Australia and on many trips,
Mm.
but I love starting off in Alice Springs and going up to Devil's Marbles and Tennant
Yeah.
Creek and up to Darwin. That's one of my happy places. I've been, yeah, Raintree. I've been to Sydney many times. It's a
Yeah.
lovely country.
Yeah. No,
But you guys are enduring a pretty good drought down there for multiple years.
yeah, it's actually been not that bad the last couple of years. Yeah, we copped it a few years ago, but yeah, we've had a fair amount of rain. It was interesting back when they were filming what's his name? I forget the director's name. Anyway, they were filming the Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, yes, I love that.
I'm heading out that way to Silverton and Broken Hill this week, actually. But they went out there, which is where they shot the second of the movies, and it was just covered with wildflowers and didn't look desolate and post-apocalyptic. So they ended up shooting in Namibia
Oh my God.
simply
Wow.
because we'd had so much rain that all of the wildflowers were everywhere, and it just didn't look post-apocalyptic enough.
Yeah, I love that whole series.
Yeah,
And I
same.
saw the latest and I thought that was really good.
Yeah. I'd like to ask, I know this is probably a very challenging question for you, but do you have a favorite place that keeps calling you back that you have unfinished business with?
I do like Africa. I've been to around 19 countries. Every time I go, it just feels great. And I tell people, if you go to Africa once, you highly likely to go back a couple of times more. It's not what people expect. So definitely the continent of Africa is really quite nice. South Georgia Island, 400 miles southeast of the Falkland Islands, has always been my idea of pure nature, with
Yeah.
spectacular mountains and millions of penguins and seals and everything else. I and my long-term assistant, Gabrielle Chacon, camped for a week on the island in a total storm. We
Wow.
hardly could get out of our tent, and yet elephant seals came down and got in under the rain fly, and they stayed for the whole week. It was something that I'm glad I did when I was younger.
Yeah.
But I love the Himalayas, Bhutan. I'm giving you a list now. But everywhere I've gone, it seems like that's my new favorite place, which is a
Okay.
great statement to say.
Yeah. That's nice.
And let me just say one other thing. A couple of years ago, I was going to lead a tour in Tibet.
Yep.
And it was largely for this book on faith because Mount Kailash in Western Tibet is the sacred spot for Buddhists and Hindus. And I lived in Tibet for 3 months on the northeast ridge of Mount Everest. It was the first Western expedition allowed into Tibet. And I tried to go back, and the Chinese government never issued me or Gabrielle visas. And yet all our participants were already in Lhasa, Tibet. And
Yeah.
then they came up with a guide, local Tibetan guide, and they were stopped by the Chinese government every day because there were cameras in the van, there were cameras everywhere.
Yep.
And why did you stop here? We're taking pictures. Why did you stop here? And it's like everything that I remember of Tibet from the winter of 1984 is fresh and great in my mind. And if I had gone to Tibet and been exposed to all the craziness that the Chinese government does, it would ruin that memory. And so
Yeah.
I'm glad I never went.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that would have been one of my favorite spots. But now it's Chinese. It's completely Chinese. Back in 84, it was Buddhist. And
Yeah. Still relatively untouched. Yeah.
no, not now. Yeah, it
No,
was.
back before. Yeah.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
was a small garrison of Chinese on the outskirts of Lhasa, but they had not gotten into the city. But now it's like a skyscrapers and everything else. And I ramble on.
That's fine. I love a good ramble. This is probably an unfair question as well. Do you have one notable experience that you've had that is just stuck in your memory?
Yeah, being attacked by a wild animal is never a badge of honor. It's a badge of stupidity. And Gav and I got pinned down by two rhinos in Nepal once. And we had guys that were trying to club the largest subspecies of rhino. And I was working on a book called The Living Wild, which was a look at endangered species. And now we're clubbing the shit out of one trying to stay alive. And we were pinned down in a banyan tree. A fig tree has all these roots above the ground, which is the only thing that saved our lives. So that always stayed in my mind because it unfolded so fast that I just had enough time to dive over the root as these rhinos were attacking. And only later did we find out that Royal Chitwan National Park used to be the hunting ground for the king, and they would kill rhinos. So these rhinos have in their memory bank the humans on ground, stomp them to death. And yeah, so that was I've had great memories. I've flown to a top of a volcano in the Congo and photographed the largest lava lake in the world right on the equator.
Yep.
But we were freezing. We were so cold. But it was a bridal beauty of, and that's for a book called Fire and Ice that will come out in a handful of years.
Yeah.
So I've been on a lot of exploding volcanoes over the years, but this was so unique because of where it was. And it was in a month-long lull in the fighting in Eastern Congo. And then it started again and we were gone. That's a lifelong memory.
Yeah, I can imagine. What has the practice of photography taught you about the world?
That people are basically the same. That 95% of humans on the planet would come to your rescue if you tripped or fell. It's just in our DNA to go and try to help somebody up. And so I'm not talking about Trump or, the leaders of North Korea or China, but the average human being is pretty much wired the same. For our own collective survival, we want the good in people rather than the bad.
Absolutely. Do you prefer shooting alone or with other people?
I hate being alone. When I travel, I'd rather be with people, because I did a book called Endangered People for the United Nations, and I traveled, throughout South America and Amazon. Then I went down to New Zealand and photographed Maoris. I went into Australia and photographed Aboriginals, even though the government of Australia didn't want me photographing Aboriginals. I still did it. Then I went up to Borneo, then I went to New Guinea, and then I went to Japan, and I traveled by myself. And I'm not one that works a room. I'm not, "Hi, I'm Art Wolfe. How are you doing?" No, I'm very quiet. I like to say I'm a functioning introvert. So I don't make friends that fast on the road. So I wound up having dinner by myself so many times that I vowed I'm never going to travel alone again. I like the camaraderie, and even if it's just one person. And fortunately, I found that in a Romanian that immigrated to the United States. He escaped out of Romania through the mountains of Bulgaria into Greece, and he became a lifelong partner of mine. And now he's married with a son, but he works with me half the year. And he's here in Seattle half the year, and then I'll be seeing him in a week down in New Zealand. So the two of us are like two peas in a pot. He's a great guy.
You talked about your processing and being really quick in Lightroom, etc. Is that typical of your portfolio work, or do you tend to spend a little bit more time on that stuff?
Here's the deal. If I shot 10,000 images in Namibia 2 weeks ago and came home, by the time I'm home, I've got 500 images. The rest are deleted. And it doesn't mean I've shot 9,500 bad photos. It's just the redundancy of the same subject I don't need anymore. And I don't want to just keep buying storage capacity. So I'm really judicious and fast at editing. But I can edit an image perfectly fine for a lecture or the internet. But then the big boys, the adults in the room downstairs in my office, they will put it through Photoshop and make sure everything's perfect. And if it's going to go into a book, they'll profile it for the printer. And I don't know any of that.
Wow.
Libby in my office does the printing with Epson's. I'm not interested. I'm the one that finds the squirrel in the forest.
The printing's an arcane art as well that I haven't mastered. I do a little bit of small scale proof printing at home just to say, okay, do the colors look right? Is the brightness and contrast okay? And then I hand it over to somebody else to go, okay, this is what it's going to look.
Nobody really wants to edit my images, so I do it, and then they try to replicate it through a different process. Lightroom versus Photoshop. And I've had Thomas Noel, who created Photoshop, on multiple tours of mine. And now the Eric Chan, who is responsible for the developmental module for Lightroom, they all work together and they've gone on tours with me. But I am definitely, as I said earlier, left-handed, right-brained. I hate technology. It's amazing I make a living from cameras. I only know 5% of what my camera can do, if that.
To be honest, most people do. I don't think anyone knows all of the insides and outs of their camera. I still haven't mastered time-lapsing with mine, interval shooting and so forth. I don't do a lot of that, but it's something that I wouldn't mind getting into, but it's just, okay, I just haven't had the brain space to deal with it.
Yeah, and you are successful as a photographer, but you teacher, you got it. You don't really need to know that, but it's funny how younger photographers feel like they've got to know every aspect of the camera.
Yeah.
Is like,
Life's too short, especially to read manuals anyway.
oh my God. I have Gav read things and then explain it to me. I hate looking at any kind of diagrams or any of that. It's just not me.
I'm going to move on to some questions that I tend to ask everyone, and they're looking at where photography fits in the
Oh,
world.
okay. I don't know if you can hear this beep. Is that interfering
No,
or do you
I'm
hear?
not
Okay.
hearing.
Yeah, I don't. Again, technology is, I'm up in my bedroom, my
Yep.
office 2 floors down in my house. And so sometimes things go ahead, ask your questions.
All right, no problem. I'm going to ask a couple of questions that I pretty much ask everyone now,
Okay.
and it's really around where you see photography in society and what do you see as its place in the art world.
That's the first question.
That's one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody's holding their breath about AI, and I don't know where that's going, quite honestly. I think if people can create images that are not true to nature or true, some people really love doing that. That
Yeah.
only makes pure, unaltered photos that much more valuable.
Hmm.
And AI came along after a Wildlives was already designed and photos picked. But if it came out next year, I probably would have had a disclaimer saying all these animals are true and wild, and which seems ludicrous that you have to say that, but with
Yeah.
AI, that might be something in the future. I think the visual image connects with people, and our writers would argue this point, but I really believe one salient image that affects people's emotions is extremely powerful and can be used for the good on environmental issues. And whole campaigns have been built around occasionally a photo. I shot a photo in Western Canada once that was used across Canada to champion the preservation of an entire ecosystem. And that is a great example of where one powerful image touches people to the
Hmm.
point where they're donating money and writing their Congress, and all that can be done. So I think we are in a pretty powerful medium. And if you can use it wisely, it can change public opinions or alert them to things like that.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy being a photographer. I think as I get too old to travel, I've got my easel and my paintbrushes and my paint, but I'm going to live hopefully a long life because I want to keep doing what I do. My
Yeah.
dad lived to 94 and he worked when he was 92. Retirement is never been something that I acknowledge.
Yeah. Fantastic. What do you see as being the biggest challenge facing photographers right now?
I think honesty and truism. I think
Hmm.
if, and I know a lot of people that really study AI say, oh, don't worry about it, blah, 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 but it's still, it's going to affect the national campaign for president in a month and a half. People, if everything becomes something that people question, then I think we're going to have to put some sort of acknowledgments that these are altered or unaltered, or so who knows where that goes.
Yeah.
I think that's
I
our
see.
I think that's our biggest challenge, quite honestly.
Yeah, I definitely see challenges with AI, particularly for product and fashion photography. I see it less. Maybe it will change. I see it less for things like event and certainly wedding photography. No one's going to want an AI shot of their wedding. Why would you?
That
Maybe
get
there is
married,
somebody that does want that. But
yeah, for the people that get married again and again,
yeah, yeah,
Maybe they can just drop in a husband
That's
every
right.
couple of years.
Could be. What do you see as being the future of photography, and where do you see photography going?
First and foremost, in the world of wildlife, we are learning more and more about relationships between animals that we thought at first glance had no relationship. And now the more people out there with their point and shoots or their iPhones, we're seeing, oh my God, that animal has a relationship with this strange animal. And they interact. And I think from a science point of view, we're just expanding our knowledge of the natural world. I think that's a great thing. I think if what Gabriel has told me, what he's read or heard, that the rising world population is going to level off, and in some countries like Japan, it already has, that could be a good thing. Because if we keep on expanding our population, we're going to overrun the earth. We're already overrunning the earth. And so I think that's not quite the question about where photography is. It's certainly going to be part of photography going forward because people still want to explore the most remote areas left on the planet. It's probably under the sea. That's the big unknown. And I think photography, for those intrepid people that will keep discovering things, it is through photography and the visual image that it's going to have the greatest impact.
What do you like to do when you're not taking photos?
I like to see movies. I like to go out to dinner with my friends. And I could be a master gardener. I've created a Japanese style garden
Nice.
with a pond with koi and a stream that runs down, artificial stream, but it looks natural. And I become a bit of an expert on bonsaiing. And so all those are ways of debriefing or compressing after coming home from a long flight.
Yeah.
So I love being in the garden.
Nice. What's the best and or worst piece of advice anyone's ever given you?
Oh, several times people have said, oh, invest your money in this. This is a can't miss. I've never invested money and ever made money. I only lost money. So those were all bad advices.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine people come for me saying, okay, Grant, invest 40,000 in this and you will make so much money you will retire early. I can't imagine people not knowing that's just a pipe dream. So I've lost a lot of money.
It's gambling on feelings, basically.
And I have zero gambling blood. If you give me a pocket full of quarters in a casino, I'm going to give those quarters away. I have zero interest in gambling. Money comes too hard to just throw it away on the whim. And the best advice? I would imagine it goes back to one of my instructors at college, which kept on. There was a famous African-American painter by the name of Jacob Lawrence. And his paintings are hung in the White House in the Capitol building. And he was the one that goaded me never to just keep doing what is successful for you, but branch out, experiment, take chances. And I have lived my whole life following that advice.
Yeah, fantastic. Who do you think I should be talking to on the podcast? Are there a couple of names that you can pick out of a hat and say, all right, these guys are interesting in the field of language mainly?
Definitely the colleague of mine that has probably a similar career move has been Frans Lanting, transplant from Holland. Another one would be James Balog, who is extremely, do you know who he is?
Yeah, I've seen his work, yeah.
Yeah. No, he is definitely a very smart cookie and has produced projects like Chasing Ice, where he documented the shrinking of ice in Greenland. He's really environmentally driven, even more than I am. Yeah. He makes his whole life that way. And he's very articulate. He would be a very good interview.
All right. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. I got one more question, and it's a question I've been trying to get to the bottom of with photographers. What's this? Episode 169. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
No,
Okay.
I like Tabasco on pizza.
Oh, yes. I'm a fan of that. Yeah. And chili flakes as well.
Yeah, the hotter the better.
Absolutely. All right. It's been absolutely wonderful taking some time. Thank you very much for being so generous with your time and your stories, Art. Where can people find your work? I know people know your name and should be able to find you fairly.
I think we have a pretty good website. They can find me on the website. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Likewise. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests on upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at gruntswinburnphotography.com, along with prints and photography gear. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram and Facebook. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Grant Swinburne and hope to see you out shooting soon.